Good afternoon, everyone. Get off my stage. Okay. Hi, folks. Welcome to the Hacktoberfest Help Desk afternoon show. This is the 4 p.m. Central European time and 10 a.m. East Coast time show. This is our second show of the day. We were joined this morning by Flor Dries, and this afternoon we have Dev2 and the foreign folks coming over. But for the next hour or so, we are going to be talking to Brian Douglas, who I will bring on in just a moment. Before we do that, brief intro. What are we doing here? What is the show? As I said, this is the Hacktoberfest Help Desk. Our aim here is to help you get through Hacktoberfest and get all of your PRs and your contributions made. We are here throughout the whole of October, 3 times a day, doing various content around different types of open source contributions, ways you can get started. We've got amazing guests all throughout the month. You can also submit your questions to us, whether they be big or small. We're taking questions from very high level things like how do I get started with open source, which is going to be a big topic of this show, all the way through to specific things like I am stuck on this particular issue. Can you help me get in this code, solve this error message, everything like that. If you want to submit a question to the show, you can do that at raise.dev/Hacktoberfest. If you want more of a walkthrough on how to submit questions, if you go to our channel page, you can find a highlight clip that will walk you through how to complete that form so that you can submit a question to the show. And what happens when you submit a question is we find one of our guests who has expertise in the topic or the project that you've posted. We answer that question for you live here on the show, and we send you the recording direct to your email so that you get all the answers you need. If you want to know who's coming up on the show for the rest of the week, our schedule is now live at twitch.tv/RaiseDev's schedule. That's updated on a week-by-week basis. That will show you the wonderful guests we've got for the rest of the week. As I said, we've got Dev2 on later. We've got Penelope from Ruby Format and Stripe coming on tomorrow. We've got Andrew Seward tomorrow night as well. We'll go through a little bit more of the guests at the end of the show, but some really exciting guests this week. Very excited for that. And the last thing from me before we get into the show, what is Raise.dev? What are we doing here? Raise.dev is a pretty new service we launched last week, and we are here to help you take the next step in your developer career, whether this is your first developer job, or you're trying to get promotion, or your second developer job, or you're trying to change industries. Raise.dev is here to help you get the experience that you need to make that move. And whilst you're in early access, you can get a free kickoff call with our coaches who will work with you on your future career. So you can find all that information and sign up now at raise.dev. So that's all from me. Let's bring on Brian. Brian, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. How are you doing today?
I am well. Thank you very much for the invite, and I'm happy to be here. Also,
wonderful.
I'm very happy to see RaiseDev doing this. Like, I think it's an awesome opportunity for folks to not just like participate in things like Hacktoberfest, but just learn, like, you know, the breadcrumbs, I guess, of getting into open source and participating. So yeah, that's
what we hope. And I think the project that you were going to talk about from you today is super relevant in that. So yeah, thank you again for being here. I know it's very early in the morning for you as someone who starts the show that's 12:30 p.m. my time every morning and complains about how early it is. I cannot believe that you're up before 7 a.m. for us. So thank you so much.
Yeah, not a problem.
So yeah, do you want to give an intro to kind of like what you do and what brings you to the show?
Yeah. So I am Brian Douglas. My name is literally below here, and I go by BDouggie, BDougieO on Twitter and Twitch, and BDouggie on other places like GitHub. But yeah, and I work at GitHub. That's my day job. I'm actually wearing this cool Octocat sweater, which is now in the shop. And yeah, my focus is developer advocate, focused in primarily open source, to be honest. I actually interface with a lot of open source maintainers, and I also teach them how to use some of the features, how to see if there are features missing within our feature suite for open source maintainers. But I cater mainly to that market, or that, I guess, persona, I guess.
Yeah.
Not much.
So it's a busy time of the year for you right now then.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and I've been honored to be able to help out with Hacktoberfest and have conversations with DigitalOcean and make sure that we're getting off to the right start, which I think we definitely are. I think that we're seeing nice. I'm personally seeing nice engagements for my project since I've opted it in. So, and happy to talk about that.
Yeah, I haven't looked at the numbers today, but we did a couple of segments yesterday, just looking at like who opted in over the weekend since the opt-in change. And like yesterday, when we left the show around this time, there's like 21,000 projects that opted in like 3 days. It was really cool. So yeah, really great to see. And you do a lot of work with GitHub Actions as well, right? Which is a topic that's come up a couple of times on the show.
Yeah, I do.
Like various capacities. So yeah, I don't think we actually really addressed what GitHub Actions is. So I feel like now would be a good time for you to get the word straight from an expert.
Yeah. Well, expert's a stretch. I happen to use it a lot.
Right.
It's funny because I've been using it since its launch, and GitHub Actions is like it's gone through a couple different iterations.
Yeah.
So I don't technically use it the way it's meant to be used, because I've been using it the wrong way since the beginning. But GitHub Actions is a tool. It's a feature built into GitHub, and GitHub. They call these internally. I'm not sure how we use this externally a lot, but we have these like primitives within the GitHub product. One being like the API, the other one being webhooks, other one being authentication. So all those primitives put together into one feature, which is GitHub Actions, and it gives you an ability to, if you wanted to build integrations on within GitHub, but you didn't want to sort of host your own integration or your bot somewhere else on Heroku or DigitalOcean, you can actually do this through a GitHub Action, where it's actually built in natively within your repo. So just by adding a workflow file, you can add a piece of automation that every time you open a PR, you want your CI to run, or you want it to deploy to a hosted provider, or you just want to, like what I do, whenever a first-time contributor opens up a PR on my project, and they get a little message that says, "Hey, thanks for this. By the way, we have a Discord," and then it sort of like gives them the breadcrumbs of like what's happening in the project.
That's super cool. I think one of the reasons GitHub Actions as well is really exciting, especially for folks this month who are maybe interacting with things like CI and lots of these like automated processes and repositories for the first time. Is like if they want to try those things, like GitHub Actions has some quite generous free minutes for every GitHub user, which is a really good excuse to play with it.
Yeah, it's 2,000 minutes. It's available to you on the your own projects. Yeah. I think with the organizations you get up to 3,000 if you have a team or organization, and then it just goes up depending on how much money you want to. Well, it's not how much money. It's actually if you just opt into a larger plan, then you get more minutes.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. So yeah, I lured you on the show today to talk about something in particular, which I'm very excited about, and I signed up for a while ago, and in my usual fashion have failed to actually use, and it's been taunting me. But I'd love to talk about open source, the project open sourced. Do you have this problem where people mishear you saying open sourced as open source a lot? Because I feel like that's going to be a big thing for me today.
I might have named it purposely that way.
Okay, awesome, cool.
Yeah, so open source is a project I started building at my previous employer, as sort of as I was transitioning from full-time engineering to DevRel. GitHub had launched a public-facing GraphQL API, and I wanted a way to basically test it out. So I built a tool, which is open source, to be the way for me to manage my open source contributions. So I always had this issue where I find a project, especially like Hacktoberfest. I find a project, I'm excited about it, and I just don't know where to start. And I think we do like a good job at like sort of like expanding the hype, GraphQL hype, expanding the hype of things like open source, and like we have a lot of people who are involved right now in open source, in Hacktoberfest. But the process of this getting your first step into the project, it could be challenging. Like even now, you're probably as a listener, you might be seeing some projects that you want to contribute to, but then you find the issues that you could do are already taken by somebody else.
Right. Yes.
So what I've done is I created a project, it's an open source project to stalk projects and sort of identify, okay, I want to look at this project. So I'm going to add it to my dashboard, and then I'm going to watch the issues, and then I'm going to take notes and watch these issues. And then when I'm ready to jump in, then I can. And so that's my instance. And it was mainly because like I've got 2 small kids. Like I don't have a lot of time to do open source during the weekdays.
Right.
But on the weekends I do. So when it comes to Saturday, I'm like, oh, what project was I looking at this week that I can contribute to? And a lot of times what happens is I forget about what projects I discovered. I'm looking at the changelog nightly. Like I see a project and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to take a note of that. And it gets put into some bookmark somewhere and I just can't find it. So I just wanted a central place to add those projects and take notes. And also take notes of like why I saved this project. Because that's the other thing about bookmarks is like, you could save it, but you're like not really sure what interests you the first time.
There, and yeah, for sure. That's awesome. So I want to dive into like actually looking through this thing and showing folks that in a minute. But I guess before we get to that, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about so one of your like the blog posts where you announced this thing, you spoke a lot about like open source onboarding, and this was something that you would also like when you and I were talking about kind of Hacktoberfest and the opt-in on Twitter the other day. This was something you had spoken about, particularly in relation to open source, about like bringing new people into open source and working on the demographics of open source through that, making that onboarding a nicer process, being something that like you were particularly aimed and cared about a lot with this project. So I guess what are the challenges that you see with bringing people into open source that you think this like can help with and address?
Yeah, it's so I guess the I guess my thought process around open source and like the reason for like having proper onboarding is having that experience where folks can have that sort of like, so when you start a new job, I guess this is what I'm getting at, is when you start a new job as an engineer, the first thing you do is you get onboarded. You have like, they give you a laptop, they tell you how to install stuff in in the repos, how to run the environment. And that's missing today in open source. And a lot of times people will shove that into like a contributing MD, which is helpful, but not every project does that. And then sometimes there could be context that's missing. Like maybe we moved from like regular, just running a Rails server to moving to Docker. And then that context of Docker is like assumed, where it's like, oh, you've got this far, you should know what Docker is. And that's not something that everybody knows even exists, even when, especially coming out of a boot camp. It might have been omitted from the curriculum by just because things are cutting edge things don't exist in every environment. And so my thought was, how can we basically have a structured onboarding to actually getting into an open source project? If I join the Node team, or if I join, whatever JavaScript or Ruby or Python project, like what are the steps that I can take to actually contribute to this, and how can we make this consistent across the board? So like that's the thing that I'm very much interested in, something I've been talking to GitHub about internally, but also I've been talking to some other external projects like Swim, who are actually working on this specifically for the JavaScript community, which is it's an interesting problem. And I think the other thing around that tweet too as well is like a lot of people were worried about if we have a gate and we have to opt in projects, then will it be harder for people to contribute to open source? And I think there's like, we're at this sort of pinnacle point with, especially with Hacktoberfest, where we could have like hundreds of thousands of people participate, which is great. But now we have the opportunity to take that sort of like massive funnel and point it as a laser beam, which are the option for opting in. So that way the projects that choose to opt into Hacktoberfest, they're prepared to onboard folks. They're actually giving them a catered experience, as opposed to like, just read all the existing guides. And then, and what I'm getting at too as well, like me being a person of color, me having a non-traditional background, I don't have a CS degree. Like all the assumed stuff that you would normally learn. Like when I walked into Graphical as a project to contribute to, Graphical being the IDE to consume GraphQL APIs. There was some missing information I didn't know about compiling, and I'm forgetting the term, but basically taking the transpilation of the GraphQL code and putting it into the web. They had like, anyway, the terms that I'm struggling to think of are the terms I've never seen before. And
now I can't remember what that term is either. It's like the cast discuss.
And I could probably open up the repo and actually.
Yeah, what is this? This project sounds awesome. I never heard of it. So what is it called?
You talk about Swim? I think
no, it's a Swim. I've got open because we want to talk about Swim as well. That's you've got an event coming up with them that we need to talk about for the end of the day. But no, the GraphQL IDE that you were just talking about.
Oh yeah, so this is Graphical. So I can drop it in the chat for folks who are following along too as well.
We've learned, by the way, folks, we pre-VIP'd Brian so he doesn't get himself banned by our chatbot.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the extra level of care.
Cool. I think I found it. Okay, awesome. And you posted it there, which is the one I'm on. Awesome.
Oh, sorry. Okay, it's actually the language. They call it a GLSP, so a GraphQL language parser. But it's actually to be able to parse the GraphQL queries and manipulate them, do like really cool Merlin things and stuff like that with it. But when I went to contribute to the parser, to contribute to a feature, I had to learn about the parser. And then I had to learn about TypeScript, and then I had to learn about all these other things in order just to contribute my small change. And that's not something I don't think they expected, because there's a lot of people who are jumping in the project already have a lot of that experience. It was a project came out of Facebook. So there's a lot of information that's assumed. But when you assume some of that information and you don't take the opportunity to like, hey, I made a video, or I have a blog post, or we have a wiki on this content, people sort of they opt themselves out of participating in the project because then they don't have basically a catered experience. They don't have an onboarding experience to actually know what's going on. When their assumption was, this is a JavaScript project, I know JavaScript, I'm actually a paid developer to do this, but I don't have any context on how to do this parts, and there's no one around to help me. Which I later discovered, and I shared the story in a couple talks I've given in this summer. But I discovered because I was using OpenSauce, the maintainer actually popped in and was like, "Hey, what's this thing?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm just trying to sort of stalk your project and try to figure out how to contribute to it. Like, I've been in GraphQL for years, I've been doing JavaScript for years, but I don't know anything about this parser stuff. So now I'm like trying to learn it." He's like, "Oh, just jump in the Discord." And at the time, the Discord wasn't linked anywhere in the repo. It is now.
Interesting. Okay.
But he's like, "Yeah, just jump in the Discord and we'll help you out." And like that's the thing that you just the part of like what's not in the contributing MD is stuff like that, where I can get extra information. I can get like access to, I guess, quote unquote, privilege of knowledge to this project just by knowing there's a Discord. And I think that's a lot of what's missing in like things like onboarding and open source. And that's what I'm trying to help educate folks on is that there's opportunity outside just writing code. There's opportunity just making stuff like that discoverable. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Fascinating. That's such a fascinating observation as well. Yeah, that's super cool. I mean, even now, like they've added, I can see the Discord in their README now, but it is like literally like the last thing in the README. So even now, it's like for you to, when there's so many places that this information could live, like actually, so there's someone in the chat, Krishnos, me and Krishnos work on an open source project that we have this problem with a lot, because it's like a project that comes in two parts. Both are different language ecosystems. Both are required to run the overall project. So you have to start them, and you have to start them in particular order. We have documentation in both projects about building those things and running them. And then we have central developer documentation for like contributing and using this project as a whole. And we frequently see developers drop into our Discord where like the chances of them performing, like reading all these materials and performing all these steps in the precise order is very few. But like that's the tools we have available to us. Like we have readmes and static sites, and that's what we've got. So that's really fascinating.
Yeah. And there's like what's also fascinating, there's a lot of projects who are taking the extra step and have like standing meetings. We'll have like office hours bi-weekly or monthly or whatever it is.
Probot does this, which I've always been a big fan of.
Probot does it. Redwood.js does it. Electron does it. They have like the standing meeting where you can converse with the maintainers and contributors. And that's like game changing, because no longer do you have to guess and grab an issue and like say, "Please, sir, can I have, this issue and like contribute here?" Like instead, it's sort of like to show up to the meetings, introduce yourself, and then someone will give you something to work on, and you'll have a point of contact to actually ask questions, and they'll even mentor you and like screen share with you. And like that's what's missing in sort of those contexts. And I think that's what the other thing, like on DigitalOcean, they have a YouTube video that I created about opting in, and like one of the first comments is folks saying, "Oh, now this is gonna hurt Hacktoberfest because the influx of contributions is going to be limiting, because then everybody can just jump in and do whatever." And I think
which I admit as well was like my first, when they did opt in, my first fear was like no one's going to opt in, and then like 100 projects are going to get hit by 100,000 people, which like has not been the case.
No, it hasn't been the case, because for my conversations with projects, and like so at GitHub, we're privileged enough to have connections to some of the larger projects, and we were able to ask questions about like Hacktoberfest and how it affects their sort of workflow. And the majority of them, it was all fine, because they're very large projects. They have large teams. But the ones that are affected with the spam were the ones below, like in the mid-tier level, who are recognized, but they're not managed by large teams or foundations.
Sure.
So those folks, there's a combination of some folks who are just doing their job and doing this on the side. But there are other folks who actually prepared. They took the entire September to prepare and have issues labeled and had onboarding experiences. So like there are projects out there that took the time to prepare for this, and those are the projects you see opting in, who are ready to take on the contribution. So knowing that knowledge, I had confidence in the shift in October 2nd to have the opt-in form, mainly because like we want to make sure that the folks that are ready to take on the contribution, they can be in front of the line and people can have a good experience. And I think we've sort of seeing that now. Like when we jump into my project, I'll show you some of the issues that The issues that people have been claiming so far, the PRs that I've
Mhm.
gotten so far, and we're talking just one weekend. So, and my project's relatively small, so I'm having a great experience so far. And I have just me, and then I have one high schooler who is helping triage. So it's me
Awesome.
and one other person who are maintaining this project, and we have not seen the influx of spam.
Right. Yeah, I haven't seen, like, in our repo exploration on Monday after the weekend, like, and with a couple of the projects we've spoken to since, it is remarkable how quickly it made the spam issues vanish. Like, there was a bunch that were closed from the week prior, and I didn't see any new ones just there. I'm sure they're still out there, but it has definitely slowed it down a lot. I feel like Matt, who's in the chat again now, gets constant props in every show we do, but props again, Matt, for that change. It was really very good.
Yes.
So should we jump into open source? Should we like to show folks how it works and what it looks like?
Yeah. I'll give it a walkthrough, and then we'll jump into the repo. Yeah, and I would say that the person that just left the chat about no PR to a single project, I think it really comes down to open source is like having a transition period of folks. A lot of people are familiar with open source, so I think the best way to get your project out there is not just label issues and add a topic, but is the right content around it. Like the folks who get the contributors have blog posts on Dev.to, they have blog posts and wikis and content. And I think that's one of the also a missing point from the maintainer side is that if no one knows the context of why the project exists, it's going to be harder to jump in. And I've had conversations with other projects like, I don't have to name the projects, but some other projects that are doing very well, especially in the JavaScript space. Like a lot of it comes down to just like quote unquote marketing, but it's not. I wouldn't like the term marketing is probably not apt for this. It's literally just being able to talk about it. If no one's heard of it, it's going to be harder to contribute to it. And it's not proper README, then it's really harder. But I'll show you my README, and I'll show you the context that I have in my project, and maybe people can glean examples from there.
Awesome.
But I'm sharing my screen, and it's this is open source.
Let me add that on. Okay. There we go. Cool.
Excellent. So yeah, this is open source. This is a project I threw together about 4 years ago. This landing page has only been around since February, though. So, or actually April. April is when it finally got context of what the project is.
Right.
And this is actually the quote I share in a lot of my conference talks. On my YouTube channel, I do have a video about my first open source contribution, and I also link to the stop spamming emotes.
Jason, come on, you've done this before. Didn't you get banned last week?
But yeah, if you don't got sauced and you lost, it's Gucci Mane's. He's a hip hop. He's the godfather of trap music. So a lot of the music that the kids are hearing on the radio today, he co-opted the style and made it. He didn't create the style, but he popularized it. But it's a quote that he has. You can definitely look up that quote. You'll find a video of him doing that. But yeah, this is the onboarding. This is the entry point. It really, one of the things I just want to point out is that I'm trying to make it very clear that we have a Discord, because that's where the conversation is happening. That's where folks are learning about open source. We've really quickly shifted away from just contributors on the project to just folks interested in doing open source, and that's what the Discord is. So we have a separate channel for folks who want to do contribution questions, but the majority of the actual the project itself is just around the Discord is just around the community itself. But I've got a login. I do have an open PR right now to fix the login right now. I'm using a GitHub OAuth app. It's a little more inside baseball, but folks will notice that I am asking for all repo data. And this is by default from GitHub's API implementation that I was trying to get them to fix, but now I have to fix myself.
I'm well familiar with those permission problems.
Yeah, but what I wanted to point out real quick, actually, anybody in the chat, if you just type in a GitHub project and I'll add it to the repo. If not, I'll grab my own. But I have a list of projects here, and the way this works is I can add a project to the repo, and then I can click through, and this is the stalking portion. I can actually get all the detail, same detail you can get from github.com, except the biggest difference is I can add notes here. So I can have notes, but then I also can see my open contribution. So if I have an open PR or if I have a comment on an issue that's still open, then you can actually see this there. And then I'm able to add notes on this actually completed. So I did a whole video on my open source YouTube channel that I shared there on how I contributed to CLI. And this is where I started. I started by adding notes on trying to add a feature, and then I wrote down the steps of how I would solve it. And then what I
That's amazing.
did, once I did that, I actually opened the issue on the CLI itself.
Very cool.
So I was able to actually gather my thoughts without just jumping in, like giving low.
Yeah.
Like a lot of times it's about value and what you provide to the actual maintainer, which sounds like open. Like a lot of times open source people feel like, oh, this is all for me, and like I should be getting all the value from the maintainer. But maintainers are busy. Even the folks that work on this, like they're maintaining a project that now is out in the world, and they're getting paid full time to do this. But they actually have to take a week off of writing code to actually triage issues.
And also particular to this project as well, like there's GitHub CLI, but there's still also like the old version of this, which Mislav is still maintaining, right? Like he's got two of these projects on the go at once.
Yeah. So what I did is, and I have a YouTube channel. And I'm going to mention this a lot, and it's mainly as someone who does DevRel and does a lot of mentoring himself. I try to put content on my YouTube channel that I explain all the time, so that way I don't have to explain it anymore, and I can just point to the YouTube channel. So there's an inside joke on my Twitch stream that I flex, which if you do exclamation point flex, you get a command of me flexing.
Amazing.
It's just a GIF that shows up. But
I think I saw this on one of your streams I was watching the other day, actually.
Yeah. So I mean, I constantly flex, but it's really because I wanted this. I don't want to have to explain again. I just want to show exactly where the information is. I bring this up because the context that I provide, and I'll bring this up in DigitalOcean's stream. I'm streaming a lot in the next couple of weeks.
We were joking with Floor, who's also in DevRel earlier, that like October is usually conference hell for DevRel people, and this year we decided just to move that all onto stream, and so everyone is on stream 24/7.
No, it's true. Yeah, I haven't even taken that correlation, but yeah, that's pretty much last year. This month I was traveling a lot.
Yeah,
and this year I'm just going to be online in front of a camera. But I bring this up because I'll bring this up on the DigitalOcean stream as well, but set up the context of my issues in a way that people can digest them. So I have this model called SCQA, which is situation, complication, question, answer. And that's what you see here. I have the situation, I have the complication, I even have the answer here as my proposed solution. And then my question, it's not in the right order, but my question is here. And then what's helpful is that I'm able to, like, Nate was able to respond back and be like, oh, yeah, that's a good idea. But what's even better is that Mislav came in pretty hot and said, you know what, actually, this is a solution. And we were able to go back and forth within within the weekend of all times. And we were able to figure out a solution to the point where I was able to open up the PR. And the way I did this is because I actually mapped out my thought process here first. And this is what I use OpenSauce for. And I'm trying to optimize for these types of features to actually help plan and like and when you walk into a project, it's not like, hey, this is broken, one line, and then walk away. It's more of like, these are the steps that I took to figure this out. And I think that's also what's missing in things like Hacktoberfest is there's a lot of like claiming issues. Yeah. But what I need really, the biggest thing I need for my project is I need people to log in and use it. Yeah. Because those are that's where I find the new issues. And then we can triage those, and then those are good first issues for the next person. For sure. So, but if I can't get anybody to use the thing, or if I'm just getting blindly, like I did get a PR where it was just changing some grammar, which I appreciate that. But like, I'm not the best at grammar. Like you're gonna find those all throughout my project. But what I asked to, and I'm gonna add this in my contributing MD, if you're gonna change grammar, also change something else that's beneficial. So if you're changing grammar, add more, like write more copy, like give me some context that would be beneficial for you and other people coming through, rather than like code triage helps picking a handful of issues and delivering them directly inbox. Like I don't have any, this is my code triage. Like I could probably do for like having a link or a little more context here. But that's what I'm looking for help with is if you're a copy editor, like provide more copy, not just
rather than just type of
spell checks and stuff like that.
Part of what I really like about having this like personal notepad is like one of the things. I mean, and you can take those notes anywhere, I guess. But like one of the things, especially about Hacktoberfest, like as you're getting into a new project you haven't been in before, is like putting yourself out there in public to like people that you respect and look up to. So having that like linked space to clarify your thoughts is really great. So just make sure I got this right. It's situation, complication, question, answer, right?
Yes.
Perfect. Cool.
Yeah, and there is a YouTube is youtube.com/ILikeRobot for reasons. I've had it since college.
Cool.
But this first video, once you've like definitely subscribe.
Yeah.
This
I love your new thumbnails, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Learning the secret to making developer content, that is situation. That's the sort of situation complication question answer. So if you want to get more context, and this is why I make videos, is so I can just say it once or say it 100 times and edit it down to once.
It's like the Ben Bolter, if you get asked more than once, give it a URL thing, right? But with videos.
Put a link on it. Yeah. But the one cool thing about this, so yeah, this is nothing but just having GitHub here.
Yeah.
But I wanted to point out real quick is that the way open source works is it actually opens up, and the reason why I need access to your repos is it opens up a GitHub repo with the same notes. So like I have no database. My database is GitHub
issues. Yeah.
And it's powered by GitHub issues. So like that same context in my notes is right here as an issue. And I think that's really what the goal is. Like I'm not looking to build a new product on top of GitHub and make millions of dollars. That'd be great. If you are a VC, definitely come out and reach out to me. But the goal is really just to get you to use GitHub and use the features of GitHub. So like all this stuff, like the active label, I actually haven't implemented that feature yet. But to know what projects you're working on actively, I'm going to be using a label to sort of dispel that inside of the dashboard. And that's really what that's the secret sauce of open source is literally GitHub repo.
That's fascinating. Does it work both ways? Like if you open an issue here, does that appear in the UI?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It appears in the UI, but it you need to open the issue.
Follow the format, I imagine.
With this format, which I don't actually have instituted. Like if anybody's listening, feel free to open it. Like I stream. The reason I started streaming on Twitch is because I was working on this. And I wanted to basically have a place to work on this, but get feedback at the same time. So a lot of the issues I open are actually while streaming. And I get that feedback and then people will use it. So I'm looking forward to actually implementing my new GitHub integration that appears whenever someone opens the issue, it will appear on the screen and notify everybody. And then we can all jump in and sort of triage it together. So that's my goal. It's a sort of like open source, but like mob programming open source where everybody can sort of contribute at the same time. But the one thing I did want to point out too as well with open source, since like this is pretty much the project, like we do have code triage set up if you want notifications. I'm using an external tool to set up notifications. They already exist. You could also create forks from this. You can obviously see this. You'll see your contributions, which if I went to one to actually have a bunch of open contributions, so I have open source instead of open source. You can see all my contributions here. So these are all the issues I've opened or assigned myself to. And these are also my open PRs. So because open source, I happen to work on it a lot. I have a very big list that I should probably optimize UI wise. But for the majority of the users, we do not have, most people don't have as much contribution work as I do.
Right.
What's
the something that I guess might be interesting, folks? We had a couple of people who were raving about GraphQL early in the chat. What are you, so for that GitHub integration, which library are you using? I'm guessing, are you using like one of the OctoKit wrappers or?
I'm not. So the thing about GraphQL, I've been using GraphQL since like day one, since they went alpha. And that's actually since the first week GitHub announced the GraphQL API is when I've been using it. So I don't use any, I don't use OctoKit directly because I didn't know at the time of this project being created, I didn't even know it existed. What I am using is I'm using this tool called OneGraph. And what OneGraph does, it actually handles my authentication and the connection to GraphQL. So this is, if you were to take like something like Apollo, but reduce that just to the authentication and just the server side, not the actual client. So Apollo is what I'm actually consuming the client under the hood with. But the server side, I don't actually host the GraphQL server. I'm just basically taking GitHub's API and then caching that with the help of OneGraph. So that's what I'm using for that. I did want to point out too as well, since I kind of walked through the project itself. This is the project itself on GitHub. And the way I'm powering a lot of this is through GitHub Actions. So the things like being able to, well, the one that actually, I'm in the wrong repo. So
I was appreciating the pizza tag on that repo. It's a good topic.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. There's actually some pretty cool pizza projects. QL, which is a GraphQL wrapper for pizza ordering APIs.
Nice. That's fantastic.
Pretty cool. It was built by a 16-year-old. I think he's gotten busy. So I was
Nice.
actually going to jump in there and see if I can help contribute because I want to order Domino's with GraphQL.
That's so funny.
But what I was going to point out is that the way this works is when you sign up with OpenSauce, it actually creates a template from that. And that's what we were just looking at my OpenSauce goals. So all the context here is the same. And the way I sort of sync the template is through a GitHub action. So I'm actually taking the main template. So if I make any changes upstream, my template would actually be synced to everybody else's project.
Oh, that's amazing. Oh God.
Yeah. So this is a pattern that I use for syncing upstream for if anybody forks my project. You can actually use this GitHub action to sync anybody's fork.
Have you told the education team about this action?
I have not.
Okay, so there's a problem with GitHub Classroom GitHub Classroom is like a tool for distributing coursework through GitHub repos, and instead of doing a fork, so you give it like your assignment repo, and instead of doing a fork, it like makes a copy of that it clones that repo into that person's repository it makes a copy for that person under your org, and one of the problems is like if you then modify your base. If you modify your base repo, like with the course assignment in it, all the students who already have that assignment don't get the new versions. This would solve problems for so many teachers who use that tool. It's like the perfect thing for that. Super cool. Nice.
Yeah, and I think the context of most people, they actually use it for forks and upstream. Yeah. But what I'm doing it is for clones as well. So like you're not actually forking the template, you're actually cloning it. So it seems like this would solve that situation, give or take. I've sort of coerced it into making sure it works in my use case, which I'm just matching the main branch from my template to the main branch on the actual clone template. Super cool. But yeah, that's how that works. I'm also, what I'm doing as well is I'm using a cache, which is like, I use that term very lightly, where I'm taking all the issues that you've created here in this repo. I'm actually caching it into a JSON file.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Here. And this, I was hitting.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so I was hitting a bunch of, so I was hitting so much of rate limiting issues because I was just abusing it. So I had to figure out some sort of workarounds. And this was the workaround I figure out for if I just want to have the data show up on my dashboard immediately, I just need to cache that data, the data that needs to show up here. So like before, this would take forever to load because if I had 100 projects or 20 projects, all I need is just the simple data of the link to the repo and the star count and the image. So I'm caching that. And what I'm doing there is I'm actually just running a cron job to have that cache run on a regular basis. So I'm heavily using actions throughout this project as sort of a workaround.
Right.
It's probably like I'm happy to hear feedback on this too as well. And you should join my Discord and like give me feedback or even open issues. The caching is not perfect because what happens is if you add a repo, which I'm going to add I don't know what a good repo would be.
Well, I guess
I'll just go to my stars.
Cool.
So there's like a cool little tool called github.com/stars where you can see all the previous starred repos. Actually, I'm going to add Git Twitch so I can talk about that as I add it. Git Twitch is my integration to integrate GitHub into Twitch. So I can have Twitch notifications based on GitHub activity. So that's what that is. So I'm looking for that. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, so like, as in, if someone contributes to a repo, like when you get like the subscribe, where it comes up with like subscribe and followers, you also get like GitHub notifications there.
Yes,
that's wild. Okay, cool.
Having a GitHub, and it's just built with the webhook. So I added that repo, and you can see my actions already started to trigger to start caching it. The problem I'm having right now, where I need to actually put this in local storage and not just put it in the cache. So I have to wait a full like 45 seconds for this to actually finish and update. So the issue I'm having right now is that you don't see this in the list at all until it gets updated in the cache. So if I hit a refresh, then you'll see Git Twitch. So that's an issue. There's an issue open for it. I will add more context to that issue for folks who want to work on that.
You can just link to a clip from this video now.
That's pretty much. I would love for help on that. Just basically just add that to the Redux. Or it's actually not Redux. It's SWR. So I'm actually catching with the Vercel library. But here you can see I've got 0 issues. So obviously I'm not going to see anything there. You can see my whopping 9 stars. But what I'm getting at is that the context of the repo you can actually just add by here. So if I wanted to add Baybot instead, so Baybot's my other chat integration.
I
can see Baybot.
Could already imagine.
Oh, it actually redirected me.
Okay.
Okay, I think we fixed this. Yeah, it was actually a known error. I would actually I need to add Baybot, so it redirects back to the dashboard. So thanks, Philip, for actually contributing that. I think he fixed that. Awesome. I think Philip's probably in the chat right now, or watching silently.
Unsure. Yeah.
Cool. He's my other contributor, or I guess he's been given committer status.
Nice.
Yeah, so I learned this from Blitz, and I'm hopefully going to implement this. But Blitz.js, it's a framework on top of Next.js. It kind of gives you Ruby on Rails type interactions.
How many frameworks on top of frameworks is that deep at that point?
Yeah, so I guess you got Blitz, you have Next, and then you have React. And then React doesn't use Express anymore, so no more frameworks at that point, but all hand-built. But yeah, 3 levels, turtles all the way down. But what I was getting at is I'm going to actually institute this, which I'm a big fan of. Where, sorry, it sounds like my daughter just woke up.
No, that's
hungry. But what I was getting at is there's like 14, and then they have level 2, and you can sort of rise in the levels, which I'm going to implement soon for OpenSauce, where I can actually have my maintainers displayed on the page. A lot of times what happens is if someone opens an issue and they don't hear back from me, like there was an issue that someone responded to 9 days ago, and I didn't see it because of notifications are hard when you work at GitHub. So because I wasn't paying attention, they were able to @mention somebody else on the team, and they were able to just find it through the contributors list.
So it gives a much clearer viewpoint to like what people's responsibilities are and who may be able to help you with a particular problem. And
and this really comes down to like what I was talking about with like there's a lot of unknown information on how to even like who owns this project, who maintains it, how big's the team. I don't know. And if like myself, I haven't actually put all that context in my project. So there's opportunity for me to improve this sort of onboarding experience. And I think there's some best practices on the maintainer end. I should fix that failure. But best practices on the maintainer end to add context of like making it welcoming, inviting for folks to understand like, okay, we've got Node to actually start the local environment. And this used to be way more complicated.
That is a pretty slim. Yeah,
and you just need npm start because what OneGraph is doing is actually hosting all the interactions for you. So you just even in the local environment, you can just log in with GitHub.
That's super cool.
Your I guess your staging data is actually the same as the production data, but I made that decision because I wanted to make sure people didn't have to run a staging database to get this to work. I also need a massive amount of help in my storybook. Stuff is so far out of date. I built a storybook a year ago, and I haven't updated it since April.
What is Storybook? People are not watching because the Storybook has popped up a lot this week, and I realized we haven't actually addressed what it is or why it's useful.
Yeah, so Storybook is it's a design system.
Cool.
And I'm typing in the wrong box.
I've got like 3 keyboards in front of me at the moment because I use a dual PC setup, and I constantly type on the wrong PC whilst I'm on stream trying to put something in chat.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I was tempted of using my streaming PC for this conversation because it's a little beefier than my MacBook. But Storybook it's a design system to which actually just got an update because I could use help for updating it too as well. You're able to put all your components of your project in here, and I use Netlify for everything. Mainly out of inertia, and because when I was at Netlify, I used to work there. I mentioned it earlier, but when I was at Netlify, oh, here it is, soft components. I
think this was the context under which on the video I was watching of yours the other day that the flex came up. I think you mentioned something about like something to do with a Jamstack radio at Netlify where there was a flex that came in.
Yeah, so this is quite zoomed up, but these are all the buttons that I have on my project. You can actually see the sort of iterations of how they're implemented. So you see this note card.
Nice.
It's
that's
all
super cool.
Storybook. So these are all React components. So if you know about React, that's helpful. If you don't, like I'm here to help. And everybody else in the team are the contributors also know about React. But this is like a feature that I was sort of planning out on onboarding. And you can sort of see this this context as well. And you see my list here. So being able to add a feature, a UI feature, if you read my contributing MD, my requirement is that you actually that you create a screenshot for whatever UI you're implementing or changing. But if you want it above and beyond, adding a storybook component and actually mapping and designing it, that would be even a better contribution. Like if you're like, a lot of times folks, and I have a hard stance on this too as well, which is maybe possibly why I haven't seen as much spam. But well, I haven't seen much spam because my project's it's not as popular. But in my contributing MD, my requirement is that you open an issue before opening a PR. And this is something that I've always instituted. I did this when I was at Netlify doing open source there. It's hard to look at code and saying, oh man, this is so good, but it's close, but it doesn't work. Like if we discussed this, I could have pointed you in the right direction. So now we have to go back and forth on code that's so close, and that could burn out the person who took the time to actually create that. But yeah, my requirement is open up an issue, even if it's like, hey, I want to work on this. Here's the context I'm looking for. So like, we actively welcome your pull requests, but we require you to open an issue because unsolicited code is welcome, but an issue is the best place to announce your intentions to work on.
And that's the piece of advice we've come back to a lot. That like, people, one of the most common questions we've had to the help desk is like, my PR was marked invalid when like it was a genuine contribution, and it's like, well, you rocked up unannounced, and no one knows what to do. No one has any context about what you're trying to achieve. So and
it's not even about validity of your code. And a lot of people, there's like this misnomer of people are saying like it doesn't matter, like when we try to increase diversity and things like open source, it's like it doesn't matter who you are as long as your code work, it doesn't matter. But it does matter, because if you write really good code but you're a problematic individual on the internet, I would rather say no to your code. And it's open source, so if anybody else wants to grab that PR and write that same code and are a nice person, I would prefer to interact with a nice person. And it might be harsh, but this is a project that could live or die based on who is involved in it. So if I have someone who happens to have a very strong opinion, political, or happens to be part of organizations that I don't also agree with, I should be able to make the decision as a maintainer and say, hey, I appreciate your code. But the way you've interacted with people on the internet, as well, the way you've interacted with here on issues, like we can't accept this code, and you're more than happy, this MIT license, if you'd like to take this and
fork it, that's the joy of open source.
Free. But yeah, we can't take the chance of having you.
That's a great policy. That's awesome.
And
really,
it's
puts paid to the code of conduct that I feel like sits in a lot of repos and isn't actually enforced in any way.
Yeah, and it's like I had to actually enforce my code of conduct over the summer too as well, because folks were doing other things, not in my repo, not in my community, but it came up that they were doing stuff outside of my community in other places. And I had to take a really hard stance on, like, I get that they're a very valid contributor and a valid member of this community, but their presence on the internet will affect the project that I'm working on. So like we have
the sort of people you want to come in your project who might have interacted with them elsewhere on the internet, show up to your project and be like, oh, this isn't the space for me, they are here, kind of thing as well.
Exactly. And like it sounds like open source doesn't have, like, some people might have the opinion of open source doesn't have a place for that sort of like distinction of contributing, that if the code works, you should be able to accept it. And I think that's the case, because if this was a company and I was a CEO and I found that one of my employees did something wrong or was part of a domestic abuse situation or whatever it is, something extreme, I would have to make the choice of firing them, because they're representing me in my company. So if they're representing my project in the open, speaking on my behalf as a contributor or maintainer of the project, then I have to make the decision of, like, in the best interest of the project and the community that has been around this, we should make that decision. I think open source, like, I think we're going through evolutions of this, and there's the conversation around ethical source too as well. And I know that's something that's come up a lot just in our circles.
For sure.
Good conversation
too. I'm big into.
And like, people want to have the conversation, people don't want to have the conversation, people, the conversation's happening. And when you have that conversation, you have to think of the full scope of what is happening. And if there are places of influences or people influencing the community, then the challenge of, like, my hope for open source is that 5 years from now, the community of open source will be like, hey, how did you build a community that's so diverse, so welcoming, with like some really, really good, talented engineers and also some really, really thoughtful thinking junior engineers? Like, how do you build that? And this comes down to like, I want to create a space where people can have conversation with me. They can get to know me. They can, if they don't like me, like they also make that decision of like, hey, I know this is a great project, but like because Brian, Brian doesn't like, football, then I can't deal with that anymore. And so that's where I'm getting at. And I brought up the CLI teams contributing MD because this is something that I did while on stream, while navigating and contributing. Is they actually have the same thing that I have too as well, where they
actually require an issue.
Yeah, they require an issue, but also they actually reserve the right to not actually merge your code.
Oh, that's great. Cool. Yeah.
Because the CLI team has a very clear goal of what they're trying to build. And like what features they want to actually build.
Yes, for sure.
So if your feature doesn't align up with their quote unquote roadmap, which I talked to you last week about, they will have a public roadmap pretty soon. They're sort of taking a break after 1.0. And actually doing vacations, which hats off to them.
For sure.
But what I'm getting at is that they explicitly say, like, you have to have a conversation with us before you decide to open up a PR. If you don't open up a PR, and I'm trying to find that sort of accept pull request fixes.
This comes back to your point earlier as well, when you were talking about like people fixing stuff on open source that like is useful if you actually use open source as well before you do it. Like a lot of people this time of year rock up wanting to make contribution, but not necessarily having like the product context for like why those features might be in demand. So that makes total sense.
No, I mean it's easy to go in and like change copy or switch my entire project to TypeScript. Like and that was like a common joke of last year of people. It's like, hey, you should change this to TypeScript. And like, sure, go ahead and open up the PR.
Have you had anyone ask you to rewrite it in Rust yet?
No, I haven't had Rust, but I've had a lot of. I tend to get that before Hacktoberfest. Like I was getting a lot of like, hey, you're not using this linter, and like this linter came out like the last 6 months, and the linter I've been using, it's been around since the project started. So like, if there's a really benefit for me to switch linters or change my test suite, then I'll do it. But I'm not going to rewrite it myself. Like you'll
just keep running the treadmill of like keeping up with the latest projects just for the sake of doing it, right? That's how how open source and people in it get exhausted.
Yeah, and the thing is, like use what works. Like use what is helping and benefiting you today. Like you don't have to chase the shiny open source ball, especially in JavaScript. JavaScript's kind of notorious for this, where yes, we're seeing a lot of Rust times being built on top of JavaScript. But there's no need to switch over to that. Like let the system mature or build a new project using that. Because if you're always chasing that, you're spending more time like working on that problem and not the problem that you originally started with. And it's like when I mentor new developers and junior developers, I always tell them, don't build a blog as your first project. And the reason for that is because if you build a blog, you'll never write on the blog. You always spend time like manipulating CSS, manipulating the latest and greatest thing, like switching from Gatsby the next to something else random, 11D or whatever it is. Like you're always be migrating and trying things out, and it'll be like your sort of classic car, where you spend more time sort of like rebuilding the carburetor.
I sympathize with that a lot. Yeah, I feel like I have this with tutorials. I feel like every time I start following a tutorial for some technology, long before I get to the end, I'll have started another tutorial for a completely different technology, just because like something will come up and I'll be like, oh, that's shiny, I'll go over there instead. And so you end up in this perpetual like intermediate state where you never actually finish anything because you're just constantly restarting. So what projects do you recommend instead of a blog?
Blog? Oh yeah. So I've been on a real tear on. I found because I'm doing a lot of live streaming, I've been building Twitch interactions.
Right. Yeah.
And I've been taking the interactions where, like, if you look for any sort of Twitch bots or interactions, you look for tutorials, they're very, very complicated. Right. And for good reason. Like, these are very talented engineers who have chose the live code and then building tools to integrate with Twitch. But the complication is like mind-numbing. Like I one of the first interactions I saw was like built on JavaScript and a Node server using WebSockets hosted in a Docker container, and also had a Azure VM. And I'm like, wow, there's a lot of buzzwords. Like, I don't think I'm gonna do it. So what I've been doing is I've been taking each section of a proper Twitch bot, like a Streamlabs or a Nightbot, and I'm building each piece. And then I want to have all those pieces separated And then one I use will be all of them together. But when someone wants to ask, like, hey, how did you build this? I'll be like, oh, here's
that one function. That's great.
Yeah, here's that function.
Super
so
cool.
So I've been actually going back to building like HTML sites as opposed to like these massive JavaScript frameworks.
Right.
And mainly because like at this point, you're not really learning a lot of HTML, especially in boot camps. You sort of breeze by it when, like, I don't even know if you learn it in your CS programs, but you sort of breeze by it as like a thing that exists. So like understanding networking, understanding WebSockets, understanding how to use the Chrome console, like abstracting all that away just to learn the basics of the basics is something I'm really excited about right now. Actually going back, even though I've learned all this stuff already, just going back and remembering of how I learned it the first time, or how things have advanced in the last 7 years since I've been doing this. It's actually been really exciting. So like, honestly, awesome. I would say like build a simple HTML site with no JavaScript frameworks and use a script tag and see how far you can get.
That's such a like there was something that came out the other day. I can't remember what it was. It was whenever there's something on the top of the Orange website that's like, oh hey, this is a new movement towards doing vanilla website, like vanilla JS, vanilla HTML or something. I get very excited about it as well, which is like when I first started writing websites was like back when it was just like, hey, throw all your HTML files in an FTP server and like send it to HostGator. And I miss that so much whenever I'm like, okay, how many build tools do I have for this website now? So I think that's a great recommendation. That's super cool.
That was when my early days at Netlify, I had a post that we got on the Orange website. I like they used the name. And the post was just like, hey, use Netlify for this reason. And like Netlify, yes, they abstract a lot of stuff and they do all that work, wonderful stuff with Kubernetes and Docker containers.
You can also just upload a zip.
Yeah, and it works beautifully. And the first response was like, why would you do this when you get this FTP in a server in your bedroom? And I was like, oh yeah, it's a good point. But also because not everybody has a server.
Yes, and not everyone wants to deal with managing that, and that then gets into a whole load of new stuff to learn.
I mean, there's so much opportunity out there and build. And like, I guess to further answer your question is build something that interests you. Because if you're building something just to build, it's going to feel like work. It's going to feel like homework. But like one of my most popular projects that I've built, and actually I interviewed and I actually shared about this at GitHub in my interview, is I built a tool to tell me when there's a baseball game. Because I don't like baseball. But baseball affects me when I actually commute into the city.
That's
San
hilarious.
Francisco.
Yeah, so especially to the GitHub office.
Yeah, GitHub office being 2 blocks away from the Giants Stadium. But so I built a tool to basically send me a text notification. Actually, it was an email at first. To let me know when there's a baseball game. So it's just basically when's baseball. There's baseball today. Plan accordingly. And it's all you need to know because I didn't want to follow the team. I don't want every time I would go like get ready for the day, I would Google SF Giants game. And I wanted to automate that portion of my life to be like, I don't need to check for a Giants game. And actually the story is actually even further back. The first week I moved to San Francisco and got a place. I actually went to Target and got a bed and a pillow and basically air mattress. And I got on the train. I was getting ready to get on the train to go home. And it was a day of the Oakland A's and the San Francisco Giants were playing. So like you're in the UK, or actually you're in Amsterdam. But anyway,
I mean, Amsterdam, close enough.
You understand football or soccer.
Also,
you understand how intense people can be. Imagine that intensity just for the 2 teams in the Bay Area, all on the BART system. So I walked on the BART with my pillow and my blanket and my backpack that I had come from work, and I'm like, oh. Sucks. What is going on? And people like baseball here. From that moment, I'm like, I'm building something to let me know when there's baseball, so I can avoid this.
Yeah, that's genius.
So I built this tool. I built it in Rails using the Rails API. I built it using Go. I built it using Ember. I built it using React. I built it using React Native. I built it using serverless functions. So it was a tool I built every year because baseball happens every year. If you didn't know, it was a tool to all the things I named. I would just pick a new thing to learn and I'd build this tool.
And it's like that. It's like a to-do app. It's like your personal to-do app.
Exactly. It was my to-do app. So like, that's what I'm getting at is you should find something that solves a problem. Open source solved a problem for me. So I don't rebuild this every year. I just add more features to it. It happened to be the place I shoved a bunch of GitHub Actions into because I was learning GitHub Actions. But I'm gonna migrate from GitHub Actions soon too as well because I'm hitting the ceiling of what I can do with them.
Amazing.
which is great because I get to understand what the ceiling is for actions.
Where the limits are, yeah, which I feel like something that I don't want to turn into an action show, but I feel like that's something that it is like not well documented or explored yet, that like it's filled in a bunch of gaps in the ecosystem. And there's a lot of companies that, like, for example, there's a lot like people using it where they would be using a lot of CI services before, and we haven't yet quite found where that line is to go back to the CI services and vice versa. Yeah. So I know we're getting quite close to time for you. Do you want to run through the open source issues before you have to jump?
Yeah.
Time.
Yeah, I'm happy to walk through the issues too as well. I can sort of talk through. What I do is and the reason I don't have a lot of good first issues at the moment is I'm actually going to do this afternoon. Is actually go through and take.
I love your issue labeling, by the way. But it's very happy issue labeling.
Yeah, I got that idea, and the README I got from a contributor too as well, who just like helped navigate into this and kind of give me feedback. And that's like, again, these are other things that you could do as a member of the community and how to make things better. If you've seen something that's good on another project, provide that value by just joining in the Discord and saying this. Yeah. But so I don't have a lot of good first issues. I also don't have anything labeled Hacktoberfest. I was doing a little experiment to seeing if I would get contribution without using the label. And it's actually gone positive for me. Where people actually look for the good first issue because I have the topic on there. Yeah.
And also, just to be clear for folks who are watching and maybe don't get this, because the Hacktoberfest labeled issues are very promoted. They do not need to be labeled to be valid, right? Like you can do any, as long as the repo has the topic, it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, so what I'm doing is I'm going to put Hacktoberfest labels on not the good first issues. I'm actually going to put them on the issues that I actually need legitimate help.
Some more discoverability. Interesting.
Yeah, and you can sort of kick the tires on. Yeah. But the topic itself is here on the sidebar, just for context of folks. So you can find a bunch of projects you've opted in.
Oh, 28,000 today. That's awesome.
Yeah, going by /topic/Hacktoberfest.
Yeah.
But going back to the issues, so this is, again, just using the app. Someone discovered in Safari. This is what it looks like in the dashboard.
Oh, that wasn't what you showed us. Why is that so big? So it's just like the header is huge, or the hero is huge.
Basically, there's like I'm using Flexbox.
Right.
So in Safari, there's something that's not translating in Safari. Sure. So just using the project in a different browser, except Firefox is another big one too as well. Firefox, the way they treat CSS can also break. But just using that and letting me know, you can see some other examples.
Browser compatibilities in 2020, like why is this still a thing?
Yeah, and so just recently over the weekend, someone jumped in and said, "I'm going to take this issue." Awesome. And the way I have this working is in my contributing MD, I've got a GitHub action that's running. So whenever you write the word .take, and I explained this. So if you've read the contributing MD, you'll see this. This person, no fault on their own. Like I just had to let them know.
They said that they wanted to take it and didn't use the keyword, and someone else got it.
Yeah. So basically, I just said, well, no, they actually did get it. They wrote wrote .take. So .take is this sort of keyword, the take.
Right.
And not a lot of people know this. So you can see he's now assigned to the issue.
Nice.
And I'm using a GitHub action to basically do that. So I did a whole YouTube video on how that works. You're more than welcome to scroll through my YouTube and figure that out. But yeah, the goal is like make it easier for people to assign themselves. So that way, Blue JYT, who is also interested in this, they know, unfortunately, they someone's already taken this. We're going to give them some time to work on this and test it out themselves. And I usually wait about a couple weeks. I'll give them like 1 to 2 weeks to sort of like kick the tires, and then I'll check in on them. Actually, I wrote an action to basically check in on folks. So if you've assigned yourself an issue and nothing's happened, like there's no linked PR, then there's like a notification of like, hey, you assigned yourself a couple weeks ago. Yeah. Can we free it up? And then this next step would be unassign the issue if someone hasn't responded back. Sort of like the Stalebot for issue.
Stalebot, but with actual actions rather than just closing the issue.
Exactly.
That's super cool.
So yeah, that is it. And then there's like this other one, which someone also already taken as well. But what I try to do with my good first issues is, which Philip's done for me. Philip's my other contributor as well, who I shouted out earlier.
Oh, this is cool.
Try to do the SCQA of what's happening. And if I don't have that, it's not a good first issue. Because I want to basically build up the person who's going to grab this and like hand them the answer. I heard this in a maintainer say this once, where maintainers don't put good first issues for this so anybody can just do them. They leave them for breadcrumbs for getting new contributors.
Right.
So what I do is I literally just like, sometimes I'll write the entire code and I'll put in the code block and say, this is the code I would write. If it doesn't work, let me know. But so .undefined, which is a great name. Really he's taken this issue. Looks like he oh yeah, that's right. He already merged this. This one's actually it's already solved. So one thing that I'm trying to get people to do is use the tags for issues. So instead of just the issue, it should have said fixed.
Right.
Fixes
and it closed the issue automatically. Yeah.
So a lot of people don't actually know that's a feature in GitHub. So this issue actually is done, and complete. So I just lost it, but I should try to close it.
Okay. Yeah.
But the hope is to open up. I'm going to open up some new issues today on stream this afternoon.
That's BWEO, right?
BWEO is my my Twitch. Yeah, I'll be streaming that, and I'll be doing some good first issue triaging, and then I'll be doing some Hacktoberfest label triaging too as well. So my hope with the Hacktoberfest is that I think I'm gonna. I mean, for good reason. I want eyes on some of the issues that I've been sort of struggling with for the past couple of months. So like being able to having the active label on the. So I need to actually write this out. But having the pinned issues, I want to be able to pin the issue inside your template repo. And then whenever there's a pinned issue, I want those to float to the top inside the dashboard.
Oh, clever. Okay.
So that's the way I want this to work, but I haven't actually explained this yet. So I'm going to actually write this out today. And some of the issues that I have sort of sitting around.
Like I haven't seen the pinned issues are like one of the features I haven't seen work their way into a lot of automations yet. That's really cool.
Yeah. So with my team in DevRel, what we do is I created a GitHub action to pin a top 5 issue, which is our stand-up. We do stand up weekly, and we just sort of share what we're working on for the week. And every Sunday, because we have a teammate in Australia, Sunday at 10 a.m., we'll all get an issue opened up that assigns all of us. And then we just add what we're working on whenever we start our day on Monday. And then we pin that issue to the repo, our developer relations repo.
Nice. That's awesome.
So yeah, there's a lot,
I need to follow up. Cool things. They're meant to be on the show.
Yeah. The other thing too, as well, is the error message when GitHub API is down, because I heavily use the GitHub API. Something that I need to actually figure out a solution to mock out. I've actually thrown out some examples like Mirage to be able to mock it, but I just need someone to basically try it out and report back.
Cool.
And
nice.
So that's
a really interesting issue as well. And they're very I have that problem a lot with all things JavaScript land, where I feel like the error is completely detached from the reality of the issue. Very cool. Neat. So yeah, thank you so much for running us through those issues. So if you're on the stream and you're looking for a project to contribute to, there's some issues open now, but as Brian said, some of them are taken, but he'll be doing some more on stream later. I've dropped Brian's Twitch, so you can jump on that stream and get them fresh off the press as he's working through them. See how those issues form up live, I guess will be a good way to get all of the context.
Yep.
So yeah, create your sorry, I've just made that local. Create your next editor with Ramira. What's this GIF? I love that you put GIFs in them as well. Right.
Yeah, and I try to make it enticing for people to actually read through and actually do. Same thing. I write my blog posts the same way.
Yeah.
Remare is a tool that I've actually talked with Iffy about.
Yeah.
He's based out in Amsterdam as well. He built a tool to basically recreate this sort of inline like WYSIWYG editing, something similar to what you would see in GitHub. He's basically recreated that. And cool. I want to add that to my note-taking app, note-taking portion of the project. So I have an issue here. If he's standing by, he's willing to mentor somebody to actually contribute to this, which is really cool because he actually wrote the project. So I'm actually going to label this Hacktoberfest Live because this one's actually ready to go.
Nice. That's awesome. Super cool. Rad. Neat. So I know there's something else you want to talk about. You want to talk about the event that you were going to be on or working on at the moment. Is this the swim event? Oh, they get virtually. Cool. No.
Yeah, actually, this one mistakenly opened up. We do host every Friday. We open source Fridays.
Yeah.
It's the GitHub virtual event. You can easily Google that and find that. But I want to actually talk about open source our events. So I was talking about like open source has actually become more of a community more than the actual project itself. So we're hosting an event to talk to open source maintainers and learn how to contribute to their projects. And this is not contributing like opening up code, just code. It's actually contributing as in what I was talking about. Like we need people to use these projects and then provide feedback, open up the issues, and then that creates a cycle, the funnel of being able to have those good first issues and the contributions during Hacktoberfest. So if you are struggling right now with trying to find issues that you can work on, you should create those issues that you can work on, which it sounds weird. Don't create issues for the sake of issues. But if you find issues, open the issue, and then you can also own contributing to it too as well. So highly recommend if you are interested. It'll be a week and a couple days from now, around the same time, and we'll have that conversation. We're going to take the conversation to the Discord. So if you want to just connect and ask questions about projects, we'll have Hopscotch will be there, who's not pictured. Hopscotch being the API tool to sort of like look at your APIs. Snowpack being the bundler, sort of cutting edge bundler for modern HTML websites who want to use script tags. They also do a bunch of other stuff, but that's what I use them for. Guardicore, which is like the sort of KS Monkey type of tool. And Superbase, which is open source Firebase. We also have Samson Gotti too as well.
I'm learning about so many cool projects on this show this week. Excuse me, I bookmark everything. Very cool.
So definitely check it out. Links there. Joe, you just dropped it down in the chat. And I'm available too as well. You can find me on the internet, bdougio. I'm pretty accessible.
Let me throw that up on the screen. Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much for showing us through open sourced and also your issues and what you've got going on. Those meetups look super fun. And there's links everywhere. And finally, bdougio on Twitter and Twitch, but not on YouTube. That's I Like Robot, which is also in there. That was my name back in college. So has that been answered on your Q&A video? Did you?
No one's actually. I don't present that name very often. It just happens to be YouTube is very weird about changing names, which I can't. Really? So because I just sort of started publishing to the wrong place. I should have created a whole nother channel for this. But
I mean, in terms of like old embarrassing videos from usernames from when we're younger, I Like Robot isn't terrible. It's not like XX. Kiss the Darkness XX or whatever weird emo names a lot of people have as Hotmail addresses. Like it's pretty bad. It's pretty good.
Daddy.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Well, that will do us for today. Thank you so much, Brian, for joining us. I'll kick you backstage and do the wrap up. So thank you so much.
Excellent. Thanks, Joe.
Catch you later. Awesome. Thank you for joining us, everyone. And thank you again to Brian. You can find all the links for the stuff we spoke about in chat. And again, just to put that on screen, if we've got a couple big ones, so opensource.pizza for that amazing tool that Brian was showing us, and you'll be able to get to the GitHub from that site as well. And Brian's Twitter and Twitch is bdougio to catch up with what he's up to. If you want to reach out to him about any of the issues that you saw today or anything that you want to contribute to the site, you'll be able to reach out to him as well. So I hope that was useful. I think open source is going to be a really useful tool for folks who are working on Hacktoberfest contributions. It feels like a lot has happened with Hacktoberfest, and like we're not even halfway through the second week yet. So there's still a lot more to go for the month. There's still plenty of time to do your contributions, and open source will really help you kind of take that long view and find those issues that you want to work on and work towards like a quality contribution. So that's super neat. So this was our second show of the day. We have one more show coming at 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, so it's US time, 10 p.m. on my time, Central European time. That's a really exciting show because that is Dev2 are taking over the channel. So it's going to be Nick Taylor and Christina from Dev. They're going to be doing contributions to Forum, and they're going to be talking about accessibility in particular. So that is our next show. That's at 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, 10 p.m. Central European Time. So I'm really excited for that. So join us then. If you have any questions that you want to ask the help desk, you can find out how to do that at raise.dev Hacktoberfest. We've got our submission form. There is a video on this Twitch channel in the highlights that will walk you through asking us a question, so you can check it out there. If you enjoyed today and you want notifications when we next go live, you can follow us on our Twitch page, and just like YouTube, there's now a second little bell you have to press to get notifications. So hit follow, the little love heart, and then press the bell to make sure you get notifications. You can also follow us on Twitter at RaiseDevs. We're just like on Twitch, we're RaiseDevs everywhere. So you can follow us on Twitter, where we're tweeting about every show and we give announcements leading up to the time. And then the final thing from, not final thing for me, two things. So first up, the schedule. So I mentioned what we've got coming for the rest of the day. Let's do our teaser for tomorrow. So tomorrow we've got some wonderful guests. We've got Penelope Phippen coming on the EMEA slot, on the 4 p.m. slot. So that's this slot. Penelope Phippen, known for all kinds of Ruby projects, RSpec, Ruby format. That's going to be a fun show. I've been warned by fans of Ruby format that apparently Penelope has some war stories about parsing Ruby and the terrible things that result, so I need to ask about that. The next day on Wednesday, we've got Flaky coming on. Flaky is big in the Mozilla community and does all kinds of weird and wacky projects. Very excited to talk to Flaky. And then on the 9th, we've got Ender from Red Hat joining us. We've got Chris Hunt, we've got Rain. The full schedule is up at twitch.tv, Raise Dev's schedule. Some final thing from me. This is genuinely the final thing now. Raise.devs, as well as this channel, is pretty new. We are here to help you level up your developer career. We launched just last week and we're in early access, and our goal is to match you with an expert coach who can help you take the next step and get the experience you need to be where you want to be with your career. Whilst we're in early access, we're completely free, so you can sign up now to be matched with a coach who will go for a kickoff call with you. I'm hearing great things from the kickoff call. So it looks like it's going super well. We onboarded a bunch of new coaches yesterday, which is really exciting. So now's a really good time to join and meet a new coach. If you're interested in that or want to hear more about it, you can go to raise.dev, or again, on our Twitch channel in the videos, you will find a highlight called Bridging the Developer Experience Gap, which is a chat with our founder about why he started raise.dev and what he hopes raise.dev achieves and how it all works. So if you've got more questions, you can find that in the video slot. And other than that, now that is genuinely all from me now. So thank you all very much for watching. If you join us later, I'll see you in a couple of hours. Otherwise, see you whenever you can join us. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye. Which one? That one. Here we go.